It's certainly a legitimate concern, given that the leaked document, and we believe that the signed document is very close to the draft document that was leaked several weeks ago. It does state that China would seek, with the permission of the Solomon Islands government, to establish a logistical replenishment capacity in Solomon Islands to support ship visits. So it is a legitimate concern. Solomon Islands Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare has assured Scott Morrison and others that a base won't be established. And he would, of course, be very aware that there are certain checks and balances in the Solomon Islands, particularly around land ownership and so forth, that could make it a lot trickier for China to establish a base there. But it obviously is a significant concern.
Well, speaking of the Solomon Islands PM, he did release a statement saying that this deal with China complements security deals with Australia, and he's gone into this deal with eyes wide open, and it actually beefs up security in the Pacific nation there, which has had a lot of troubles that have resulted in Australian troops having to be deployed there. So when you look at that, is this deal a positive for Solomon Islands?
Well, what we have to work with is the leaked draft security agreement, and that is, it's vague, it's ambitious, it's ambiguous, so it isn't actually clear what gap this would necessarily fill. Now, obviously, that there are concerns about the scope and nature of the security agreement, who the security personnel would potentially be, what their roles and tasks would be if deployed to Solomon Islands. But it is very, very unclear about what the actual contribution and what gap they would fill. However, after the document was leaked, Solomon Islands government official did make public reference to the security agreement aligning with a package of economic cooperation agreements. And we know this week that a delegation of Chinese officials are expected to travel to Solomon Islands in mid-May in order to sign a package of economic cooperation agreements. So we need to understand the security agreement in the broader context of economic agreements as well.
It's not just Australia and the United States that are concerned. Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand Prime Minister, has said that she's also disappointed by the deal that's been struck. What's the wider impact for New Zealand here?
Well, New Zealand has been very clear and very robust in its response to this issue. In December last year, the New Zealand Ministry of Defence released its defence assessment, which specifically states that the construction of a military base in the Pacific could fundamentally alter the strategic balance of the region and support activities that would be counter to New Zealand's interests. And there are wider regional implications for this. There are considerable concerns that it cuts across and undermines existing regional crisis management arrangements in the Pacific, which have served the region well to date. And it's not just Australia and New Zealand who are raising these concerns. Tonga has raised the concerns. Other regional members are also very concerned as well. And we can expect the issue to be raised at the Pacific Islands Forum meeting in June.
So there are long-term ramifications for the wider Pacific. What about the people of Solomon Islands themselves? What does this all mean for them? Suddenly on the global stage in some way, shape or form, what does it mean for them?
Well, you know, this issue has been very divisive in Solomon Islands. There certainly isn't clear support across the country. Now, the Prime Minister, Sogavare, may find that this plays out unfavourably for him at the ballot box at the elections next year. We also may see local frustration spilling over, as we have seen in the past, which will obviously be deeply worrying. And then, of course, there is the regional standing for Solomon Islands in the Pacific itself. And that is obviously something that Prime Minister Sogavare will be very conscious of and very aware of his regional reputation too.
So there's a lot to play out here. Anna Powles, thank you so much for your time and your analysis.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.